Joe Show. Trial lawyer is what he is. If you think you want to be one, you better just listen in.
Okay, we're back for another episode of the Lawyer Joe Show. Obviously, with me always, producer Tommy in the back, and the man of the hour, Joe Ahmad. Joe, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Aaron?
I'm doing well. This is a beautiful place. You brought us out to Anahuac. I've never been. We're from Dallas, so I had to make the drive down, but beautiful home, and we're right on the beautiful lake here. Can you tell us a little bit about Anahuac?
Sure. Well, the most famous thing about it is the gator capital of Texas, and there is a gator theme running recurrent through the entire town. And so it's hard to come here without missing a picture or some reference to a gator. And inside the courthouse, there's actually a wooden, I would say almost life-size, but not lifelike carving of a gator. So that is its claim to fame, and it does have, the lake and then the bay out there. You can probably see the lake in the background. The house, it is very nice. It is not our house. It is just, obviously in every location that is outside of Houston, and this is about an hour outside of Houston. So it's just a lot easier every day to find a place on location. So what we did is we just, kind of rented this very nice house, I think. I've been here now for, 3 weeks, so I think it's very nice. And we got a beautiful backdrop. So it's actually, quite nice. And it saves us a lot of time. We have a nice war room set up in there. You saw it.
I did. I want to talk about the war room. So the courtroom is right down the road. Is that right?
Correct.
And so you guys kind of get here, and obviously the traffic and the timing and stuff make more sense to stay here versus in Houston. I did see the war room. Can you tell me a little bit about like the war room? What that's for? It's pretty badass to see.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you're collaborating on a trial, it is important to have everybody there. I mean, obviously, this is not a remote activity. You need to have kind of everybody in the room. I mean, there are some times when you go off and you just need to, prepare alone. But by and large, it helps to have the entire legal team together to kind of bounce ideas off. When we have a trial day, talk about what happened during the day, strategies and adjustments that we need to make. And I think it's necessary to do that. Get a room where you can all talk together. So as you probably saw, we had a station for me. We had a station for my partner, Wei Ning. We had a station for Brittany, one of the other lawyers, as well as Grace and Davis, who I know you met.
Yes.
All on the legal team, as well as our legal assistant, Michelle and Wesleyan. So they're all there. And, we're bringing in food or occasionally going out for food.
It's really cool to see, Joe. You guys come together. You guys are all focused. Everything is about the trial, and you make adjustments. I think adjustments is a big theme. You mentioned that there's trial prep, and you go in the courtroom with what you guys feel like you're ready with, but then adjustments have to be made. So can you tell us a little bit about what goes into the nuances of that during a trial?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of preparation for trials, especially the longer complex commercial litigation that, I do and, our firm typically does. And so there's quite a bit of preparation, but at the same time, you don't want to be too wedded to your preparation because everything changes when you go to trial. And, I think I've said this before, it's kind of like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. There is kind of a massive adjustment process that you need to go through whenever you go through trial. Because number one, you've got the judge and what the judge, the rulings the judge is making. Maybe you plan on, introducing one piece of evidence, but you can't, or the other side, wanted to get into some evidence. Maybe you thought they would, but they can't. And you kind of got to adjust to every judge. And every judge is different. And every judge approaches trial differently. Some put time limits. Most judges put time limits, but not all. And so you really have to adjust to the judge. And then you have the witness. You can take every single witness's deposition, and that rarely happens, by the way. But even if you do that, there is always something new that comes up with respect to a witness, and you will have to adjust. And then you have opposing counsel, opposing side, and what they're doing. And, I look at trials sometimes as kind of a crucible where, only your best arguments actually survive. And I think the trial process, if you haven't done this in preparation, which can be hard to do, the trial process will teach you what arguments can survive and what cannot, right? Because with every witness and with every examination by opposing counsel, you see where they're gaining momentum and where they're not, right? And in preparation, it's just, I think, psychological. We love to throw in all the arguments, right? And sometimes it's hard to let go. I mean, you hear the saying, you got to kill your darlings, which basically means you may love some arguments, but they're not the best and you need to let go. If you can do that in preparation, great. It's just humanly not possible all the time. And then when you get in trial, you will see some arguments, you're just not getting a lot of traction on. The other side has good arguments against you. On the other hand, there will be some arguments they don't have an answer for. And so you will naturally, if you haven't done it in preparation before, you will naturally, or you should naturally pivot to those arguments the other side doesn't have an answer for, right? Because, one thing I can tell you about trials is you cannot ignore fatal evidence. You might be able to, ignore, or better yet, explain maybe not so great evidence, but if it's fatal, there's no point in ignoring it. You have to come up with a plan. And if you haven't come up with a plan and you're dealing with it at trial, you're in trouble, right? But the same is true for the other side. If you have got an argument that wins the day that the other side cannot explain, that is what you need to lean into. And again, if you haven't prepared to really, really focus on that, then hopefully the trial process will teach you, this is what I need to argue, and I need to let go of some of the other arguments, right, that the other side is making momentum on. Because what you really want to do is make the trial about something you can win on and the other side cannot respond to. Because that way it looks like you're winning and the other side is struggling to respond to your arguments. But if you're making every argument that can be made and the other side is scoring points, then it looks a lot different. And you don't want to be the one that is actually on the defense on that argument. And the only reason this, should happen is that you just weren't willing to let go of some of your weaker arguments. And so, yeah, you're dealing with all those variables. And then, of course, it's a little bit hard to read, but you should pay attention or have somebody kind of paying attention to how the jury is reacting. Again, some jurors are more kind of responsive than others. But for example, a lot of times you can tell if a jury is getting tired or a jury is getting bored. And there is nothing worse than, kind of going on as you think eloquently in your own mind when the jury is not paying attention or they're bored. And, it's happened to the best of us. But, I think you want to be cognizant of it and really hit new points that captivate the jury and not get, into the weeds, at least not too long, such that you're boring.
Joe, you mentioned a few things. So you said fatal evidence. Can you explain what fatal evidence is for the audience?
Sure. It's an argument that by itself should win the case and that the other side doesn't have an adequate response for. And a lot of times you may think you have that kind of fatal evidence, and then you'll discover in trial, well, it wasn't as great as I thought. The other side actually has some pretty good arguments. So in preparation, I think we all want to have the evidence that the other side can't respond to, right? You can, in preparation, maybe you can figure that out. But if you can't, the real test comes at trial. You may not know everything that the other side is going to do beforehand. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But during trial, you can see what they cannot respond to. And because you'll hear it right then and there. And so during the trial process, especially the longer trial, it doesn't really apply as much in a really short trial, 1-2 day trial, but in the longer trials, you need to adjust and increasingly focus in on that argument, let go of the other arguments.
Yeah, pick and choose your battles. That makes sense.
Exactly.
You also mentioned the judge can dictate a lot of the adjustments you make. Can you explain to us what makes a good judge and what makes for a judge that maybe you have to make a lot of adjustments for?
Well, I think even a good judge you have to make adjustments for, because there's a range of judges that can be good, but they can be different, right? Is it a good idea to put lawyers on a clock? A lot of people would say yes. I've seen good judges put lawyers on the clock. I have seen good judges not put lawyers on the clock. I have seen good judges rule a certain way on evidentiary issues, and other good judges rule differently. So there's, it's not necessarily the bad judges you have to adjust to, although you certainly have to adjust to them. I think you have to adjust to every judge, especially if you haven't been in front of them before, because they're all different.
Yeah.
Even among the good judges, they're all different and they have different approaches.
Yeah, I'm curious, what does make for a judge that you appreciate, and what does make it? What's one attribute for a good judge, and what's maybe an attribute that a bad judge has, just in general?
The good judges always rule my way.
There you go.
But number one, just a judge that rules. Sometimes you get judges that just don't rule.
And can you explain that?
Well, you'll make a motion and you just won't get a ruling.
Okay.
There have been judges who, have gone years and years without ruling on certain motions.
And what is the psychology behind that decision making? Like, why do they do that?
Well, that's, you could come up with a variety of reasons. I have never been a judge. I've clerked for a judge, which I think is very helpful to kind of understand the perspective of the court. But it can be, it's a hard issue. It can be, they are struggling with it. It could be they don't have enough time, but it's hard to say. There's any number of reasons that a judge might not rule. And at some point it becomes, a real problem. When you get to be years in, when you're not getting a ruling, that can be a real problem.
So another thing you mentioned is really feeling the jury out for if your message is landing. Do you have any tells or any kind of maybe body language signs that you pick up with after all this experience working in front of a jury? Maybe one thing that you can tell what's one tell that you are losing your jury?
Well, I don't know if I have one tell.
Yeah.
And, you just, I guess just use common sense. When you see people moving around in their chair, they're probably bored. But I will tell you, I have been fooled before. I have seen jurors, one in particular in a case long ago, probably, 25, 30 years ago. And the juror was nodding, when I was doing opening statement and when I was doing closing. And I thought for sure this juror was with me. And I don't recall whether the juror was or wasn't, but I talked to the juror afterwards, and I asked him, I said, well, it seemed like you liked my arguments because you were nodding. And he pointed out that, his chair was kind of a rocking chair, and he was just rocking back and forth. So, it is a little bit like tea leaves. I've gotten it wrong before. Yeah. But I think there are certain things you can tell. I think it's a lot easier to tell, for example, if they're bored, if they're not interested, if they're not paying attention. I mean, you'll see some jurors that just flat out fall asleep on you. Now, generally, those aren't the jurors that are going to make decisions about your case, or you hope not. Those may be just the followers. But, that's probably the easiest thing to tell. Sometimes you can kind of tell if they're on your side or not, but that can be very, very hard.
Joe, you've mentioned that you've talked about sincerity over polish in trial presentations. What do juries actually respond to? Someone who's sincere or like very polished as a lawyer?
Well, I do think jurors are, remarkably tolerant of a lot of different lawyer styles. But I do think the one thing you don't want to be is fake or a phony. And to the extent that you're polished, I think that can be okay as long as that is who you are, right? But if you are polished in the sense that, the juror is detecting that this is not really who you are, then I think it's a problem. And I think what you can be, to kind of have that sincere effect on jurors is to be, more contemporaneous. I talked about not being wedded to your preparation because you have to make adjustments. I think with witnesses, some lawyers will come in there with an outline and they will just stick to their outline. They will just go check off question by question. And they don't really listen to the witness, and they don't really follow up with something that a witness says. And so, and again, if you haven't done a lot of examinations, I think it can be very hard to just kind of be in the moment listening. But, hopefully you get to the point where you're actually listening and you can just ask, kind of contemporaneous questions that obviously don't look scripted. You're not, reading from an outline. I think that helps a lot if you can actually pay attention and listen to what the juror is saying and ask questions about it. And, so a lot of times I'll just do that. It's a little bit tricky because you're leaving the outline, and frankly, sometimes you leave the outline and then you look at your outline and like, where was I? But I think it's very, very important.
Of course, being on your toes. That leads me to my next question. AZA is very respected and known for all of the trials that they go into, and in the short time of getting to know you, you guys, you've stayed busy going from courtroom to courtroom. How do you manage, staying focused between all the different trials that you guys are in at a time?
Well,
even doing this podcast, Joe, like you got a lot going, right? So how are you able to keep your focus and your prep when you are juggling so many different things?
Yeah, well, I probably have to go in like 2 minutes.
There you go.
Of that.
Yeah.
I think you can, at least I, can only focus on kind of one thing at a time. And one thing that I've noticed in doing this for a long time is that it is remarkable how much information and how much knowledge you will have about a case while you're trying it, and then how quickly it disappears once the trial is done. I think it's amazing how quickly you can forget about all the details that you knew so intimately, and yet 2 weeks after the trial's done, all of a sudden it's a distant memory. And so, you focus on one thing. You really can't focus on too many things at the same time. And I really think when you're in trial, that has to be your sole focus. In fact, even though it's about the case, there have been lawyers, within our firm that don't even want to talk settlement because it distracts them from trying the case. And they have suggested that a client get a designated settlement lawyer so they can focus solely on the trial. Now,
Wow.
I don't do that personally, but I understand why that can be on the approach, because you really want to focus on trial.
That makes a lot of sense, Joe. Joe's a busy man. We appreciate your time. He's got to get back to his trial work, so we'll be in touch here soon. Thanks, guys. Okay, and we're back, but we have a more beautiful co-host with us today. Michelle, how's it going?
It's going good. Hello, guys.
You're back. How does this feel? This is round 2. Joe obviously thinks so highly of you. She was like, you got to get more Michelle, more Michelle. How does that feel?
Now that he's gone and I can just say whatever I want to say and he's not here, we're going to get Michelle today.
Okay, so we got to see the war room. It's pretty cool to see the behind the scenes before, the team goes into the courtroom and the trial, is in progress. Tell me about the setup, like what goes into the setup of the war room? Like, why is this important? Just break like what a paralegal's take is on a war room.
A war room is your office away from your office. So you just have to make sure you have everything here that you could possibly need that you would need in your office. You want everybody to be in the same place, computers, printers, depositions, everything that you could possibly need to prepare for trial, you want to have in your war room, whether that's in an office building or in a house like the one we're here in Anowak.
So when we pulled up, the courier was waiting as well. Who coordinates with the courier? Can you explain to us what their job is?
So the courier's job is to bring everything we have in the war room and the courthouse to the war room that we're working out of here at the house here. And normally back in the old days when we were a much smaller firm, the paralegal used to get all her boxes, put them in her car and drive them down to the courthouse, make multiple trips to put the boxes in and out the car. But as you become seasoned, the firm gets a little bigger, a little more, make a little more money. Then you hire companies to do that legwork for you, and they just come. If we forget things at the office in Houston, they go pick those things up. Like today, we ran out of ink for the printer. They go to the office, they pick up the printer, they had to pick up a check for the court reporter. They brought it back to us, and then they brought the boxes from the courthouse to the house.
That's awesome. So lately on my algorithms, I've been getting on a lot of paralegal talk, like paralegals talking about their work, how much money they made, like how much they appreciate the job, how much they didn't know about it, and now that they're doing it, they love it. I thought your takes were really good the last time you were on, talking about kind of the work that you do and how you found it. And it wasn't something that you ever thought you'd do, but you kind of ended up there. Tell us a little bit more about like any advice for young professionals who don't know what they want to do, but are interested in the legal space and might want to be a paralegal. Do you have any kind of words of wisdom?
Well, it's hard work. It's kind of like the nurse to the doctor, the paralegal to the attorney. So maybe if you didn't have the time or the money to go to law school and law was just something you were always interested in, being a paralegal can get your leg in the door, help you decide if that is truly a field that you might get into it and like, no, I don't want to have anything to do with law. I wanted to be a radio and television broadcast journalist. So
we're one step closer.
This is my life. That's why I need some followers so I can, get into what I really want to do. You might get into it and decide, hey, this is not for me. I don't want to be hollered at, I don't want to be talked too crazy, because it's not always cookies and cream.
Of course. It's a high stress environment sometimes.
Can I curse?
You can do whatever.
They say shit rolls downhill. So if the attorney is not doing a good job, then the client is upset. So if the client is upset, then the attorney is upset. And if the attorney is upset, then who you think that's going to fall back on?
Yeah.
So, you just have to have thick skin. The goal is to win. You have to be able to take the good with the bad, the long nights, early mornings. It's not all gravy. And coming into it, it's not a high-paying job, I don't know what the starting rate is now, but some people, they go to college and they get bachelor's degrees and they think they're going to come out making $80, $90 a year. I don't think that's what paralegals start out. You have to prove yourself. And once you prove yourself and bill your hours, then you can get into the money.
That's awesome. You mentioned something inside about getting a hat every trial, or what was it that you were talking about?
I get a trial gift every trial.
Gift. There it is. Tell me about that. What is that? Why do you do it?
This trial, I bought myself a few different trials. But because I've been working a lot of hours.
Yeah.
But it's rodeo season down here in Texas. So, this is my rodeo hat.
No, you're killing it.
This is my trial gift.
You're killing it. The look, the green. kind of the theme of Anahuac Gators and green, and I see a lot of green. Even Joe. What do you think about Joe's suits? I think we talked that before, but he was wearing the green and
He is probably the fanciest lawyer at AZA Law.
okay.
You know, that man got some suits.
Yeah.
Some expensive suits. But gotta keep him happy.
And he rolled up in the nice Batmobile over there. What do you think about his car?
It's the Beast.
The Beast.
It's called the Beast. And the Beast is a conversation in the courtroom by everybody. The other side, the judge, everybody's commenting on Joe and this Beast. I say it's a midlife crisis, but other people say he's past midlife, so I don't know.
It's cool watching him hop out of the Beast.
He's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. Any closing thoughts or, anything that you want to share with the audience or your audience or anything that you feel like is...
I don't really have an audience. I'm just joking. But
no, you do. You're fascinating.
I try.
Good energy.
That's what they say.
Hell yeah.
Just try it. If it's something you want to get into, just try it. If it doesn't work out for you, it doesn't work out for you. But just be ready.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Second part with Michelle. Maybe we'll get a third and fourth if we're lucky. Thank you, guys.